Okay, so let's walk through how this is basically structured. The first thing I'm going to do again is just make sure everything's been placed into this preliminary folder. And as for the others, I'm just going to hide them. Alright, cool. So now what I want to do is I want to add in my base colors. Okay. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go over here to the right of my canvas, create a new layer group, and I'm going to call this colors. And I'm going to place that below my line art. Anyone know why that might be?
So your lines are up on top of you?
Yes, so that I'm not painting over my lines and I can still see exactly what's going on with the line art. Okay, so the next folder I'm going to create is another folder layer group in the colors layer group, and I'm going to call this one base colors. And this folder will contain all the base colors that I want to use for my frog guy here. Okay, so I'll make a new layer in there, and I'll just call this main body, for example. Okay, and of course, as I color in the different elements that make up this design, I'm going to create a new layer and name them appropriately. For example, this might be his eyes. And sometimes I'll just add, base at the beginning of them so I know what they are. Okay. Very important to make sure with something like this that you're naming your layers correctly, because a project this size can actually get quite big. And again, if you're having to click through turning off and on and off layers the entire time, then it's going to take up a lot of your time. All right. So the first brush I'm going to use is the Arondi brush, or the 30 hard brush in the Adonis brush pack. Okay, this brush is a completely opaque brush with a hard edge. Okay, and it's basically going to allow me to fill in the colors of this object. So this isn't going to be a brush that you're really going to use for shading or blending of any kind. It's mostly just for laying in flat base colors. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is actually come up with a color scheme for this guy. Right, so I'm just going to get rid of what I've got here already. And I'm going to jump online for a moment, and I'm going to just try to find some cool frog references. Go into the colorful one. So stuff like this. Like this is a kick-ass frog. Right. Got a whole bunch of blue ones. I'm just looking for something interesting. I actually really like the color of this one here, so I'm going to keep that. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it into my document here as a reference. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and begin color picking from it. So go ahead, main body. Maybe the main body of my frog is going to be this color. So he's a swampy frog, lives in the swamp, so we're going to select somewhat, swampy colors. Something like this. Maybe that. Yeah, cool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin creating a color palette. This color palette is going to consist of my base colors, a shadow version of that base color, and a highlight version of that base color. Darker tone, lighter tone. Everybody got that? We've gone through this before. So I'm going to select the base colors first. Now again, I think, I really like this orange here because it's going to, combine really well with this green, And it'll also make this dude look a bit more dangerous as well. You know, add interest to him. You really want to focus on creating an interesting color scheme, because if we were to say make this guy all green, one, that'll look unrealistic because, you know, frogs at least normally have a different colored belly. And yeah, it's just going to look a little bit more flat. Whereas if you can add more colors in there that are interesting, that complement this base color, it's going to make for a more interesting design. So I'm going to put this orange in. And you can see, because nature is really good at combining colors and making them look nice together, that as soon as we color pick and then lay down this base color, those two colors are going to go well together. And then I'm going to get some of this blue in here as well. I don't know what I'm going to use that for just yet. But so let's go ahead now and just turn that off. Now that I've got these base colors down, what am I going to do? Make a darker tone and a lighter tone. So I'm going to go up to the top one here, and I'm basically going to use my color panel over here to create the darker tones and the lighter tones. So I'm going to decrease the brightness in the bottom slider. By the way, if you don't have these brightness, saturation, and hue sliders, what you can do in your color panel is you can go up here to the right hand side of the panel and make sure you change it from whatever it is, whether it be RGB or grayscale, to HSB. Hue, saturation, brightness. This is really nifty because, again, it allows you to select a color and change the brightness and saturation of it. Now, typically darker colors, I do like to increase the saturation within them a little bit. And I'm also going to change up the hue somewhat. Again, when we're talking about darker tones, they're either going to be a warmer version of the base color or a cooler version. And in this case, I'm going to go for the cooler version. So I'm going to basically just add a little bit more blue into this tone. And then I'm going to place it down as the darker shadow tone of my base color. Going to do the same thing here, and with the green, going to go ahead and decrease the brightness, increase the saturation, and I'm going to add more blue into the color. Alright, and I'm going to place it down onto my canvas. And then finally I'm going to do the same thing for the orange. Decrease the brightness, increase the saturation, and finally add a cooler variance into the shadow. And of course, a cooler version of red is pink or purple. I guess this is more orange, isn't it? So maybe we'll just make it red. Alright, cool. So now that we've got those shadow tones down, what we'll do is we'll create the highlight tones. Again, this is basically going to work in the opposite way. We're going to increase brightness. We're going to take out some of the saturation. And then I'm going to add in some warmth to those highlight colors. Now, a warmer version of this cyan color is obviously going to have some more green in it. Right? So we'll place that down here. You can see these colors are actually going together quite well. Going to go down to the green, do the same thing. Again, increase brightness. Take out some of the saturation. And add in some yellow. And then finally, I'm going to select the orange, increase brightness, decrease saturation, and add in some yellow, like so. Okay, now obviously, like, you know, I'm going a bit slower with you guys, but, you know, I'd be doing this on the fly. So you want to kind of get fast at this stuff, like the entire process, so that you can jump into it as soon as possible. Because typically, the more you think about it, the more you procrastinate. Right, and the longer it takes to get done. Okay, so now that we've got those base colors sorted out, we're going to go ahead and go to basically the body main layer, okay, for our base colors. And I'm going to create a base color for his body. Now, the main body of this guy is actually going to be green, Okay, so I'm going to, again, using my color picker, select that green color, and I'm just going to begin painting over the entire thing, like so. Now you'll notice that this line art isn't really that flash hot. It's only a sketch, but that's fine because ultimately this entire guy is going to be painted over anyway, and we'll be painting out the lines altogether. So it's not really worth our time to go in there and refine them all that much, because ultimately they're not going to be in the final product. They're kind of just there for our reference. Now some people will actually start out with like a blob of paint and they'll begin articulating it like that without a sketch at all. And again, that's just something that you'll get a feel for later on. You know, once you've drawn and painted enough, you'll kind of figure out your own way of doing things and, you know, what you're comfortable with. So painting in his feet. And I'm just roughly doing it, like it doesn't have to be 100%, as long as you're keeping the color somewhat in the confines of the sketch. And at this point, you really begin to see how the silhouette is looking at as a whole. So basically how the design looks, you know, shape-wise. Now in a video game, most of the time, your characters are going to be running past the viewer pretty fast. Like, it's not like, you know, most of the time you won't really get an opportunity to sit there and just look at, say, the enemy, for example. They'll be running around, you'll be seeing them out the corner of your eye. So you basically have to make sure that your character designs are quite readable. And the way that we make them quite readable is we make a strong silhouette for the design. Okay, because in a game, you're basically using the equivalent of your peripheral vision. You know, that's what we see first when we're looking at a character. Painting in his toes. And if you can follow this exact workflow, you should be pretty much fine. You know, oftentimes when you're first figuring out how to do this stuff, it can be disorientating because it's like, where do I begin, kind of thing. But at least with this, you know, you've definitely got a beginning, middle, and end to the entire process. So if you just follow along with this stuff, you should be okay. You know, it should help you not get so overwhelmed. Okay, so we got our sketch. We place in the base colors after creating a color palette. Just painting in his antennas. Okay, so this is basically the first step, you know, that main base color. And then what we'll do is we'll create a new layer for the other elements that make up his design. So for example, he's got these giant kind of like bauble things here on the side of his cheeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start coloring that in a little bit. I'll just call these cheeks. Actually, I think I'll make his eyes black, maybe, because I kind of want to give him a nice orange. Actually, let's talk about how to add a new hue to his body, because I kind of want his main body to be made up of a few colors. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this layer Hue Shift. Now this is going to be still a base color, but it's kind of going to be a transition between one color into the next. So let's change to our airbrush for a moment. I'm going to control click on the thumbnail of my main base color, hide that selection, then I'm going to go into the Hue Shift layer and begin painting in another hue. Okay. Again, if we go back to our reference, it's basically what I'm using to guide me. And you can grab your eraser tool and you can erase the areas that you don't want to be changed in color. Okay. You might add different hues to his feet. I'm going to change up the hues for his mouth here. I can actually change that orange a little bit. And of course his belly is going to be a particular color of hue as well. Okay. So basically what I've done is I've taken that base color, I've changed my brush into an airbrush, and then I've just painted straight over the top in the different areas that I want to be colored, you know, alternatively with my airbrush. Okay, so you can see that base color is still there. Alright, and again, in a sense, I've basically created a new color palette here as well. Because now that I've laid these transitions in color down, I can color pick from them and create new base tones, right? So, yeah, let's go ahead and just color pick from this one now. Okay, cool. And then of course he's going to have just these little black beady eyes. Okay. His teeth are going to be a little bit lighter and white. Okay. I know that's a little bit hard to see on the projector, but yeah, basically that's given us a really good base to work with. Once we got those base colors down, the next step is to actually add in the base shadows and base highlights. The reason I call them base shadows and base highlights is simply because they're just going to be darker and lighter versions of the colors which are already there on the canvas. As we move on throughout the process, ultimately we will actually be giving different color lighting conditions to those tones and those highlights, okay, so that we can actually make him look like he's sitting in an environment. Alright, but the first step before we do that is to place in the base shadows and the base highlights. And at this point you'll notice that I'm actually still working below the line art, okay, so I can still see all the details and stuff that I want to integrate into the image above those base colors. Okay, so we'll call this base highlights and shadows. And then I'll create a new layer in there and I'll call it base shadows. Now, very important, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transition back to the palette knife brush, or the first 19 brush in the Adonis brush pack. And now what I'm going to do, like I know that I've created like these, you know, base shadows and base highlights over here, but I'm actually not going to work with them as much at this point. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start color picking straight from the colors which I've laid down, and I'm just going to turn them into darker versions. All right. So, and the reason for that is because now that I've blended these colors together, they've created a color palette of their own. Which means, you know, I could select this base shadow color, but it wouldn't really go with the blue that I've placed down. Okay, so basically I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, for example, select this color here. I'm going to take down the brightness and the saturation, and I'm going to add more red to it. And then I'm simply going to begin drawing in those base shadows. Now, of course, I want to make sure that I've got my lighting direction indicated. Okay, so I'm going to have a light coming from this way. Right? This is something that I need to keep in mind throughout the entire illustration so that I can keep it all consistent. The moment it doesn't become consistent, it loses believability, meaning that the viewer will see that something's off. They might not know what, but it's just not going to look believable. All right? So again, what I'm doing is I'm just painting in these shadows. And you'll notice that this is very much the same process that we've already gone through when we were creating the grayscale tones. Just going to go ahead and select this base again, just so that I'm painting within its confines as I work. So I don't really want to travel outside the line, that base. Okay. Awesome. So now I'm going to go ahead and begin coloring in the rest of the face by, again, taking down the brightness, the saturation, and increasing those cooler tones. Make this darker. Now that's probably a little bit hard for you guys to see. So yeah, literally all I'm doing now is painting in those shadows. And it's really easy too, because I'm simply thinking of everything as simplistic forms and keeping the lighting direction in mind as I do so, as I lay in these colors. Now obviously the top of this frog is going to be casting a shadow over the bottom of his belly. Okay, so we're going to add in that shadow. Then I'm going to re-stroke over that shadow that I've just added in to intensify it. And that's the way this brush works. So basically, the more times you stroke over a single area, the darker and more intense it's going to become because of that opacity setting. I'm going to go ahead now, select the area of his arms, decrease the brightness, and over the top. Again, I want to avoid that kind of, dark on one side, light on the other side thing. So I'm going to keep, make sure that don't fall into that trap. Going to select this area. You see that, basically I'm just working off of the color palette that I've kind of manufactured in the beginning. I'm going to decrease the brightness. Just going to lay it in those colors. All right. You can see already that his forms are beginning to start coming out. I'm going to go over here to like these little bauble things on the side of his cheek. Like later on, we can have them almost glowing. Like it's like this toxic radioactive poison inside his cheeks there. So I'm going to go ahead, increase the brightness of that. It's funny how Got a Gorilla with like, the Gorilla had these weird puffy things as well. I don't know, there's something wrong there. What's wrong with me? It's funny though, like, this is what I love about art though, and teaching students how to create this kind of thing, because ultimately when you guys do apply yourself and you begin to kind of grow into yourself as a designer, you'll start to express your own ideas and your own kind of design languages, and you get to the point where people are saying, oh, you know what, your artwork kind of looks like a cross between anime and American style or something like that, and you're like, yeah, you know what, that's cool. It's really cool. Or like your artwork looks like a cross between this artist and that artist, and you begin to kind of fall into themes that you prefer to work within. That's really cool. So I'm going to paint out his toes here. We're going to modify and clean up this silhouette a little bit later on. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to darken up these areas here below him. Again, by just color picking the area I want to darken up and taking down the brightness of my color that I have selected. Okay, so can all of you guys see that this guy has form now? What's the next step? Highlights, yes. Glad to see someone's paying attention. Very nice. Wait, first we have to actually go ahead and do his gums. Okay, cool. So highlights, yes. Now I'm going to go base highlights. Then I'm going to select, basically just do the exact same thing I did for the base shadows, except in the opposite direction. So I'm going to select this orange area here, increase the brightness, maybe decrease the saturation a little bit, get some warmth in there. And then I'm just going to, again, keeping in mind this, basically I'm just going to run over those forms. Actually, I don't like the way that's looking. If I don't like the way it's looking, I just erase it. And at this point, it really doesn't matter if you erase it because, hey, it's a little bit rough around the edges. It's okay to make changes. It's not like you spent hours refining it just yet. What's scary is when like you continue on and you do render out something for like the next 16 hours and you realize something foundational is off. Like, oh, that guy's head is slightly too big for his body. And then like you have to go back and you have to change the entire thing. Sometimes you even have to erase it all. That's really bad. Especially if you're on a timer. You're working on the clock. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, add in some highlights for his back here. See, I got some really nice colors coming up. Possibly. Take a look. No worries. Going to go ahead now, do the same thing for his base body. Oops. Going to bring out some of these wrinkly details around the side of his mouth here. And slowly but surely, you'll see this guy come together. And, I don't want to talk myself up too much, but it'll start to look really cool. I just want you to remember that, don't be overwhelmed by its coolness. Remember how it came about. It's just going through this simple step-by-step process. And the reason that it, comes together in the end is because it does work. Like, I didn't just come up with this process out of my head. I took it from other professionals as well. And I practiced it and kind of put my own spin on it. Restructured it for you guys so you could learn from it. But for the most part, it's going to work if you follow it. Okay. So now we've got some highlights for his arms there. Knees. Okay. Then what we'll do is, let's add some shiny to his eyes here. Yeah. Suddenly he's got a soul now. Let's add some highlights to his feet. And we'll go ahead, select his belly. I'm going to go back to my base shadows for a moment, and I actually forgot to add shadows to this part, so let me go ahead and do that. Go back up to my base highlights. Again, increase the brightness. And then finally, we've got his teeth. Got to be careful with teeth sometimes, because if you do them wrong, they can begin to look cartoony. And because we're keeping within the realm of realism, you know, we want to make this look believable, then we're going to have to make sure we pay attention to that. And later on, we'll put some drool coming out of his mouth. Don't worry. We'll put that in there. I'm going to go ahead now, just bring out some of these wrinkles here. Because remember, we wanted it to make it look like his mouth would actually shoot out, like an alien mouth. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Damo gave me that idea. Alright, sweet. So, that's right on break time, guys. Basically, this ends the initial stage, okay? This is basically where we want to get it to before we begin, you know, refining what is already there. But as you can see, that's taken all of, what, half an hour, okay, to get those base colors, the palette, base highlights, and base shadows in there, okay? And it does look much better on the screen up here, so you can take a look before you leave if you want, for your break. Just want to make these a bit brighter.
Yeah, I was going to suggest to be kind of close that next word or something.
Yeah, we will. And you know what? What we can do, guys, is once this guy is finished, we can actually make it so that the glow is reflecting back up onto his skin slightly. That, like, you know, especially if these are glowing, we can actually have, like, you know, some glow happening on his face. It's going to look epic.